can say hello to them.
This okay.
In online.
Oh, in online, yes. UTM. We have some participants who are coming from UTM Malaysia. Please welcome to our lecture series. We apologize for start this lecture like quite late because we still waiting for the more participants joining with us through at theater room at our campus, Department of Urban and Regional Planning, and also in the Zoom meeting. Right, we will start our lecture series today. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon to all participants who are joining offline and online. Welcome to the International Lecture Series 2023, Series 7, sorry. We are very delighted to have all of you here to have some discussion with our lectures today. Assoc Prof. Dr. Eric Thompson from National University of Singapore, and also Dr. Holi Bina Wijaya from Department of Urban and Regional Planning. I would like to welcome all of participants from other university who are already joining with us online via Zoom, and also our lecture, guest lecture, adjunct Professor Felicitas Hilman from TU Berlin. Thank you for joining with us today here. And also students from Diponegoro University, batch 2020. And before we jump to the main event, please kindly see the agenda today. After the introduction, we will have the opening speech from the head of Urban and Regional Planning Department, Ibu Wiwandari Handayani, but unfortunately she cannot join with us right now. She just meet us here, and she because she have to attend the next agenda, and then followed by, after the opening session, we have the main session that will led by the moderator, myself, Intan Hapsari, and then followed by discussion and also the closing remarks. So without further ado, we will go to the main session. I will introduce our lecturers today. The first is Assoc Prof. Eric Thompson. Yeah, Dr. Eric Thompson is Associate Professor in the Department of Sociology in the National University of Singapore. Before joining NUS, he completed a Ph.D. in the Sociocultural Anthropology at the University of Washington and was a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Southeast Asian Studies, University of California, Los Angeles. And here are some courses that he taught at the university, from the cultures in the contemporary world, urban sociology, graduate research seminar, and etc. And his research interests are rural and agrarian transition, urbanism, transnationalism, and gender studies. And here are his recent publication. Most of them are related to the such as the urban annexation of the rural. And next, he also have a publication about immigration society and modalities of citizenship. And maybe next, in the next page, please. Yeah, Thai waves in Singapore and transnational patriarchy and etc. Maybe enough, I think, the way I introduce Pak Eric. And without further ado, I will hand this session to Pak Eric to give the lecture. For today, you will have about 40 minutes for your presentation, and the time is yours.
Thank you. Okay, I'll try to use this microphone here. So I think, do we have my slides? Right. Okay. So thank you for inviting me to this international lecture series. It's been, I'm just to give the background, well, my background's already been given a little bit. I'm in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the National University of Singapore. My research over what's been 30 years now, actually, because it goes back to about 1992, 1993. I've been doing research on a variety of things, but one of the main issues is on rural and agrarian transitions and transformations in Southeast Asia. I originally did dissertation research in Malaysia, in northern peninsular Malaysia, in a village or kampong there, a Malay kampong in the state of Perak, in the northern part near Kedah, if you know the geography of Malaysia. And I've also, since that was when I was doing my dissertation research at the University of Washington in Seattle. And since that time, I started my position at the National University of Singapore in 2001. So I've been there for a little over 20 years. And during that time, I've been able to work in other places throughout Southeast Asia. Particularly, I've done a fair amount of ethnographic research in Northeast Thailand, but then also had the opportunity to collaborate on a fairly large project on agrarian smallholders and agrarian transitions in Southeast, or in Asia, actually, across Asia, because it included research done in Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and elsewhere. And in that, since that time, Holi and I have been collaborating on these issues and had some collaboration here at Diponegoro. Most recently, I've been doing more research, ethnographic research here in Indonesia, and specifically this year, I'm doing a research project in Batang Regency in the southern part of Batang Regency. I mean, trying to think, north and south don't make sense, but ini tempat ulu. Kalau Melayu dikata ulu lah, kat pendalaman ya. Dan ini atas bukit the highland areas of Batang Regency, right? Not the coastline, right? So anyway, the temperature is so much cooler and nicer up there. Anyway, so one of the things that some of the things I'm going to talk about today, they come out of my background and my experience in doing this research for a while, but also I'm going to be talking about some of the issues that I'm just kind of starting to think about in the very specific context of rural area here in Central Java. So some of the talk is kind of, you might say, exploratory, sort of raising a number of questions and a number of things to think about, rather than very definitive like conclusions, so to speak. So, and we can discuss it as we go along here, and at the end we'll have time, I hope, for some Q&A. So I guess the next slide, right? Okay, so for today's talk, what I want to talk about is, first of all, just since the topic, in a sense, that we came up with was on sustainable rural transformations, and I want to just sort of start framing this by thinking about what do we mean by sustainable rural transformations. Then a little bit, give a little bit of an overview of urbanization of Desa Kota regions, and then what I call rural urbanization. And then two sort of interrelated topics that I've been thinking about in the context of my preliminary early ethnographic research here in Central Java. I mean, these are issues I've been thinking about for a while, but I'm now thinking about them in the specific context of our research program, right? One is about the effect of the commodification of social relationships. And then the other is the sort of community context of social values. And I'll try to explain what I mean by that, or what I think I mean by that, because this is where I'm sort of thinking through some ideas that relate, again, back to issues of sustainable rural transformation. Okay, so next. All right, so if our subject is sustainable rural transformation, what do we actually mean by that, right? And so the point I want to just make here is that there's a lot of, I mean, sort of in the general, since we have a German colleague here, the general zeitgeist, the general sort of worldwide discourse. Yeah, there's, yeah. I'm just zeitgeist it's a great word anyway. But in the sort of general in the era we're living in, right? We hear about sustainability. Sustainability has sort of become this issue. It's in reports or programs issued by the United Nations or various governments. You know, it's a sort of a political objective of many people. And it's tied into, sort of the effects of the modern world that we live in, where, you know, modernity has brought a lot of material benefits and comforts and wealth and prosperity in certain ways. But there's clearly a lot of issues around things like the effects on the environment, the changing kind of relationships that we have with other people, the way that, you know, wealth gets generated, but then not necessarily distributed very evenly, etc. Right? So there's all these, there's all of these issues. Sustainability is this issue, a concern, right? But my point here is to just say that when one comes across discussion of sustainability, I would say that two of the realms that it comes across in are sort of economic sustainability and then also environmental sustainability, right? Clearly, one of the issues nowadays is about questions of climate change, particularly our use of fossil fuels. Some people argue our production and consumption of meat, particularly beef, and also, you know, population increase, et cetera, all of these things clearly are having effects on the environment, and specifically on, you know, the general idea of climate change. And the question is whether or not the kind of society and also the kind of sort of economy we have and so forth is sustainable. Are we going to sort of, you know, how to put it, use up the environment or something, right? And or affect the environment, particularly in negative ways that are not sustainable, right? That will eventually cause some sort of crash or collapse or however you want to envision it, right? And then this is also kind of related to often sort of focus on our economic systems, particularly sort of the capitalist sort of growth-oriented economic system that has kind of been prevalent in the world over several decades, if not several centuries now. So when we think about sustainability, we usually think about it, I think, primarily as like environmental sustainability and then maybe sort of kind of economic sustainability. But what I want to talk about today is thinking about the ways in which we can also think of social issues as being important to think of in the context of sustainability. So for one thing, I think, you know, and I'll touch on this in places in my talk, is that particularly when we think about our economic systems and relationships, and then the ways that those, especially sort of growth-oriented ones, like affect the environment and so forth. I think we can't just simply extract our discussion and our thinking about economic issues from our thinking about social and cultural issues, right? So I think that's one way that I think these social cultural issues have to be included in our thinking about sustainability, and in this case, sustainability in rural areas and rural transformations, right? So that's one issue around sustainability, and or socio-cultural sustainability, so to speak. And then the other, I think, is that thinking about the ways in which clearly when we think about modernity, we think about urbanization, we think about sort of the industrialization of the economy and so forth. All of this, you know, what's happened over the last couple hundred years with modernity has been a lot of rapid transformations in the ways that we as human beings live on the earth. And as importantly, the ways in which we live in relationship to one another. And so thinking about the ways in which, I mean, this is not to say that everything that's been established in the past is always desirable and necessarily should be sustained. There are a lot of ways in which we've treated each other and related to each other in the past, which are not good ones and should be changed. But there are also sort of certain aspects of what a lot of people would agree, maybe not unanimously, but most people or many people would agree are positive sort of social values that we would like to sustain and maintain over time. And so thinking about those in the context of sustainability is of significance as well. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that being said, thinking about so the first point there is that what I'm thinking about, and I'm going to talk about in a couple different ways, is thinking about issues of sustainability, but sort of the sustainability of the social and sustainability of the cultural, you know, not as completely separate categories from, say, the economic and the environmental, but I mean, that's as an anthropologist, that's sort of my focus and my specialty, and also sort of thinking about them both sustaining certain kinds of cultural norms and or certain kinds of social relationships in the context of urbanization. And also, I think ultimately, although this is not the focus of my talk, but it's another thing to be thinking about, is how those then also link up to the issues of, say, environmental sustainability or economic sustainability. Now, that larger issue then, I'm thinking about in the context of rural places, and specifically the places that I work in, which are basically, most broadly put, sort of rural places in Southeast Asia. So when we think about this, though, too, when we think about the rural and the rural within the contemporary world, it's clear to everyone who pays any attention to what's going on that rural places, like the rest of the places in the world, have been changing over time. So when we, you know, when we spend time in, you know, a rural village in Indonesia or in Malaysia or in Thailand or anywhere in Southeast Asia, with some fairly extreme exceptions, you might make an argument for certain particularly, for example, particularly, say, isolated places or something where there's maybe more or less change over time, maybe, although we'll set that aside. But in general, most places have changed a lot. So rural villages in Indonesia today operate socially, culturally, economically, politically, and otherwise very, very differently than they would have certainly, you know, 50 years ago or 100 years ago, maybe even, in fact, I see a lot of change compared to now from 30 years ago when I started doing research in Malaysia. So there's been a lot of change in rural places. The idea, sometimes, I don't know to what extent anybody holds this anymore, although you still come across it, where like people make these assumptions that rural areas are sort of traditional or unchanging or conservative or, you know, even worse, backwards, or, you know, all of these sort of negative stereotypes, and also stereotypes of places that are, and also this sort of idea that, oh, the rural places are so different than urban places. You know, cities are modern and blah, 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 and then rural places are conservative and backwards and stuck in the past and blah, blah, blah. And none of that's true, but it is a sort of stereotype that gets repeated fairly often. Point is that rural places are very different than they've been in the past. That said, there are different ways in which different rural places have changed over time. And there's been a lot of research in Southeast Asia, more generally in global geography, cultural anthropology, and so forth, that have looked at this. And I want to just say here that taken in two very, very, so one very broad distinction to make here is to say that there's been a lot of research done in terms of what the geographer Terry McGee called Desa Kota regions, right? So Terry McGee, hopefully you've probably all come across his work and his, or at least you've come across maybe his idea of the Desa Kota region, right? Where he worked in, he was a geographer, he's from Canada, he worked in Indonesia and doing this research and theorizing it. And so he took the Indonesian terms, desa and kota, right? The desa being the rural and the kota being the urban, but talking about desa kota regions, which he was specifically talking about like these basically city fringes, or another way to put it is like areas between you've got, if you take, especially if you take something like Jakarta, right? Or even Semarang, right? You have a sort of very, very, very urbanized core. And then, but then as you move out away from that core, you get into more and more places that, you know, you sort of move towards the desa, the rural, but there's a lot of places that are developing and changing kind of on the fringes of the city, right? Another term that's sometimes used is peri-urban areas, right? And so those are areas that they're neither, I mean, the way that he was thinking about it was they're neither like rural in the way we think about traditional rural places, but neither are they fully urbanized. And so that's why he theorized this sort of desa kota region, the peri-urban city fringes and so forth. Another term that's been used, which is related to, but not the same as the concept of the desa kota region, is the idea of in situ urbanization. So these are places that sort of maybe have a history. I mean, this is actually this is kind of true of absolutely every place in the world, as long as you go back far enough. But there are places that, you know, sort of originally start out as like agricultural, rural countryside or villages or whatever, but over time have, you know, grown into cities. Yet, you know, what's important here is often looking at the ways, though, in which certain aspects of their character, culture, economy, and so forth, kind of, they don't just completely disappear, but the sort of the historical antecedents of the present are sort of have grown up and developed in certain ways, and that there's some link to where the places started, so to speak, with where they end up, right? And so that's in situ, right? I mean, in situ being kind of within the thing itself or within the place itself, right? So these places like become urban. And in fact, Holi is going to talk about that in more detail in his part of the talk. Now, there's another sort of way of thinking about rural urbanization, though, and or thinking about like rural transformation. And this is what, again, kind of for a want of a better term, I'm calling rural urbanization. And so this is talking about the ways in which rural villages are or have become kind of socially and culturally urban spaces. When you look at the literature on the sort of what defines the urban and what defines the rural, right? There's all kinds of classic sociology and other kinds of things that kind of look at like the city as a way of life, right? And like sort of describe the things that happen that make a city urban, right? And make it a particular kind of place. And a lot of times when you look at that, the kinds of things that they point to is, for example, like classic ideas, this is a French term, but anomie, right? Or like feelings of anonymity, feelings of like the ways that people become more atomized or become more individualized in cities, right? Lose ties to sort of more traditional social ties, such as, ones of extended kinship families, but then develop new kinds of ties. But often these are not really to individuals, they're to institutions, right? We go to school, we grow up learning in a school, and then we go out and work in a university, or we work in a corporation or in a factory, right? And then we also have, we go to religious practices, but they can be kind of like, a church or a mosque or something in a city where, you sort of go to the pray because of your individual devotion, but, you don't necessarily have very strong ties with the other people in that religious space, right? So anyway, those are all the point is, those are all characteristics of what sociologists have classically pointed to, saying that's what defines urban life, right? And the argument, and this goes to, this is kind of old, you can still get it, but I'm hawking my book here. So this is the book that came out of my dissertation, is Unsettling Absences, Urbanism in Rural Malaysia. And one of the key things I argue in this book is that when I was doing my ethnographic research in the 1990s, when I looked at what people were saying were characteristic of urban life, right? Like loose social ties, etc. That's what was characteristic of life in this rural village, right? Like, for example, that, in the morning, people were not sort of getting up with their family and then going with their family out to the fields to like plant rice or something, right? And coming back and spending like their whole time with members of their family. The kids were going off to school. The parents were often going off to like work in a factory 2 hours away, or going into town to work in a shop. Some people were working in the village, but they sort of go off into their own individual kebun to do work, their own individual orchards and so forth. And then other aspects of the culture and so forth were very, if you looked at what the sociologists say characterizes urban life, that's the kind of life that people are living. So that's why I'm saying, like, a sort of urbanization that's happened in these rural places. But the point I'm also making here is that these are not on the fringes of cities. These are, places like the village that I was in. You had to go like 17 kilometers to get to a very, very small town. Okay, a very small town, not even a city. You had to go like a couple hours to get to a city. Similarly, now I'm actually working outside, if you know where Bawang is. So I'm like not even in Bawang. I'm like outside of Bawang, but then from that place or from Bawang to here, you have to come 2 hours, right, to get to Semarang, to a large city. So the point is that I'm talking not about places that are like, it's different than sort of in situ. It's not, these places are not sort of becoming urban in the place of like, this is like on the fringe of a city. These are far, far from cities, and yet that sort of urban life has developed there, right? I'll just mention here another word I didn't put on my slide, but another thing to look, if you're interested in this literature, there's another set of literature around a concept called planetary urbanization. That's also useful literature to look at. It's sort of saying how the whole planet is becoming urbanized, right? It's not just urban areas that are urbanized. It's like everywhere it's urbanized now, right? So anyway, so that's the context where I'm sort of thinking about of sustainability, or I'm thinking about the issues I'm going to talk about in a moment here. And most specifically, I'm talking about what's going on in these sort of places that everybody would sort of, I think everybody would say, yeah, that's a rural place. Or in Malaysia, like when my friend first invited me to come to do my ethnographic research in the 1990s in Malaysia, the way he described it was, "Ini betul-betul kampung ah." So this is really a kampung. This is really a village. So, this is not a fake village on the side of the city. This is a real village. So anyway, so these are places that are in Malay terms, betul-betul kampung, right? Okay. Next slide. Right. So the folks from UTM will know. Okay. All right, so what I wanted to so thinking about this though, and thinking about like what are some of the effects that are going on in these places, and but also like what are the sort of these so how what sort of social and cultural issues does this urbanization cause, and where do we have to sort of look at, you know, as a sort of as an ethnographer, what sort of things that I'm looking at and thinking about how social and cultural issues are developing, transforming, and or in certain ways being sustained over time through a variety of practices, right? One of the main issues that I'm interested in is this issue of the commodification of social relationships, right? Now, this goes back to you know, some of the sort of key theoretical ideas, which are very, very old ones in anthropology or just in the social sciences in general, right? Some of this goes back to there's a classic analysis of the gift. There's a book called The Gift by Marcel Mauss. It's from like 1912 or 1920s. I mean, this is a 100-year-old theoretical framework, but it's still a sort of important, interesting thing to think about, right? And then so one is the concept of the gift, and the other is the concept of the commodity fetish, right? And this comes from Marx's analysis of capital, which again, I made the same disclaimer. I just want to make a very strong disclaimer here. I'm not talking about political Marxism. What I'm talking about is the sort of analysis of how sort of market systems work, right? And I think that this concept of the commodity fetish is a valuable idea to think with and to consider, right? So with regard to the idea of the gift, right? What Mauss is really focusing on here, and it really develops out of the concept of the commodity fetish, right? The basic idea of the commodity fetish, if you're not familiar with it, is the idea that in a sort of very marketized society, right, where the exchanges that we make with other people are done in the concept of an idea of a market, right? I buy something from you, you pay me, I give you the thing, right? The idea of the commodity fetish was to say that in any kind of exchange, there is both a commodity relationship and there is also a social relationship, right? So when I exchange something with you, you know, you're a person, I'm a person, we're having a social interaction. We're creating, I mean, in fact, if you look at the way that sociologists study society now, one of the main theoretical frameworks is like social networks, right? It's doing social network analysis. How do people relate to other people? And what a social network is a group of people who are connected through some kind of exchange, right? When you study a social network, you say like, what is being exchanged within that social network? Now, sometimes it's physical things like gifts, but sometimes it's just like, you know, who do you get advice from, right? Who do you talk to when you feeling concerned about things? Who do you get support from when you need support in some way? Who can you borrow money from, right? Or who would you lend money to? I mean, so there's all kinds of ways. But the fundamental thing about a society, I mean, that's what society is that we have relationships with other people, right? So there's always a social aspect to exchange because you're creating or you're enacting a relationship with another person. But also there's something being exchanged, right? I mean, sometimes it's something it can be like advice. It can be friendship is a sort of, you know, I can be your friend, you can be my friend, right? We're sort of like doing that for each other, right? It can be something very abstract and not like very definable as a commodity, but then often it's also, you know, commodity or money or something. We're sharing food or sharing, you know, when you have, I mean, that's like the classic Indonesian is the selamatan, right? That's the classic, or in Malaysia, it's the kenduri, right? So that's the classic context in which you share food, and like, yes, there's like in the context of like in a selamatan for a kenduri or for a wedding or a kenduri in Malaysia, right? When you go there, usually you give the tuan rumah some like money or something, right? Like in Malay, they, an ampao packet or something, and you eat and stuff, and you're like, and so there's things being exchanged. There's money going back and forth. There's food being exchanged. But the emphasis, and this is Moses' point, is that in gift exchange, when we conceptualize something as gift exchange, we are emphasizing the social relationship, right? It's like when I go to a kenduri in Malaysia, I go to a selamatan here, right? Especially for in the context of a wedding, there's lots of selamatan. Everything you do has a selamatan here, right? But so, there's sort of exchanges going back and forth in terms of like food being exchanged, sometimes money being exchanged, etc. But the emphasis is on the relationship, right? The emphasis is my relationship to the family where the wedding is taking place, right? Or my relationship to, like, you got to do if you're building a house, you do a selamatan, right? And you do it with the people involved in the work there and so forth, right? But it's part of like, as the person getting the house built and the workers doing the work, right? We're having a selamatan, but the selamatan is shared food, and it's not about like, I'm paying you so much to get this thing, right? Whereas in market exchanges, right, and this is, as opposed to gift exchanges, again, this is a conceptual cultural issue, really. But conceptually, when you are thinking that you're engaging in a market exchange, the emphasis is entirely on the commodity, right? And this is, Marx called it the commodity fetish, because his critique was saying that it makes us forget that this is also a social relationship we have with someone, right? So if I go down to the Alfamart here, right, or another context, 7-Eleven, whatever, I go to the Alfamart here, and I want to have I don't know, what would I buy there? I want to, I'm blanking sort of, I want to just buy so I want to buy some aqua, some water or something, but bottled water, right? So I want to get, I want to buy the bottle of water. I get the bottle of water out of the refrigerated area or whatever. I take it to the cashier. I give the cashier my money, and I walk out of the store, and they don't call the police to arrest me, right? Because I paid my money, right? So there, though, I mean, we don't think about our relationship to the cashier. And even less so, we don't think about our relationship to all of the people gone into the production of that bottle of water. We're just thinking about the bottle of water, and the bottle of water costs whatever, 500 rupiah or whatever, or 500 rupiah, no, 5,000. I don't know what, 5,000 rupiah about, maybe, let's say 5,000 rupiah. So I'm thinking about the relationship of the bottle to the cost, right, of two commodities. Money is the ultimate commodity, right, because it's pure value. So what happens then, so the point of all of this is thinking about the ways in which the question here really is, how can social gift exchange networks be sustained in the context of increasing marketization of the economy, right? So very, very, very traditional agrarian communities, right? There still are some. They're very rare in the world today, but there are still some, and there traditionally were many. Most of our ancestors lived in communities that were based entirely or almost entirely around social exchange, right? I mean, if you think of like, if you want to think really super classically of like so-called like hunting and gathering or foraging communities, right? Where pre-agriculture or outside of agriculture, people go out to hunt, usually men, sometimes women, but mostly men go out to hunt. They hunt, they bring back game, and then they share it with the community. Similarly, when people go out gathering, they'll gather and they'll probably eat a lot when they, as a lot of times you're gathering, you're just eating as you go along gathering, but also you're collecting things, especially if they're like prestigious things like honey or or certain kind, certain berries or mushrooms or something that's like particularly prestigious, right? Then you bring it back and you share it with the community. And there are all kinds of norms and things around this, right? So our very traditional societies have been one which are based at one point in time entirely around gift exchange, entirely around exchanging with other people, so that the point here too is that gift exchange doesn't mean that the things are not important. I mean, the reason for having this gift exchange, or one big reason, is to share the meat or the honey or the berries or whatever it is that you've collected, right, with the community. And having those as calories in your diet are important, right? So the question is then, but the question is, like, in our increasingly commodified world, how do we still maintain these kind of significance and focus on culturally the social aspect of our exchanges, right, and our relationship with other people? All right. Next slide. All right. So this is another somewhat in relationship to that larger abstract issue. One of the things that I'm particularly looking at in my own ethnographic research right now is what, and this is where I'm thinking through how to phrase this, how to think about this, right? But thinking about community contexts and social values, right? So, and particularly here because anyway, I'm working in, I mean, the place I'm in is a Muslim majority village. In fact, I think I haven't met anybody there who's not Muslim. I think it's every, so I'm thinking particularly about communal religious practice. And the thing, I mean, there are other things you can look at, right? This is not the only kind of social values by any means in the village, but it's an important part of it. But kind of looking at the ways in which mosques and musola function as these sort of centers of religious community networks. All right. And in fact, this is the Holi and I I mean, the other thing we were doing today and this last week was putting together a proposal for a set of papers that we want to present next year at an international conference in Surabaya. But the paper that I'm thinking about and developing, I'm calling it at the moment In Search of Respectability. There's a very famous ethnography by Philip Bourgois called In Search of Respect. So I'm kind of playing on that title, but In Search of Respectability, but thinking about the ways in which there are sort of local community values and community practices that I don't inspire, promote, and sustain, if you want to use that term, sustain certain kinds of social networks and relationships within probably rural villages generally in Java, but certainly in the rural village where I'm working in, particularly in outside of Bawang. And so thinking about, what I'm thinking about is basically the practices, the everyday practices, right? So, and I participate as a Muslim myself. I participate in the everyday sort of practices around the musola. So the musola, there's the daily 5 days of five times those prayers. Generally, there's a relatively small group of men who go every day to subuh prayers, and a few women as well, actually. So there's a few women, a small group of men, larger group of men who usually show up at Maghrib prayers, right? And sometimes Zohor happens at the musola and sometimes it doesn't, depending on if the imam is busy. but there's sort of like, several times a day, sometimes 5 times a day, there are, groups of men who go to the musola to pray. And then there's also, of course, on Malam Jumat, there's always a Jama'ah, a Ta'lil gathering, like there's a photo here, right, in the one with the men looking at us. Whoops. I just lost my Zoom just disconnected. somehow. Am I connected or no?
Same.
Sorry. Give me just a minute to. Do you know if the Zoom went off completely?
That's the problem. Maybe the
Sorry,
internet.
give us just 1 minute. The internet seems to have gone down.
The internet.
Was it just us?
Yeah.
And I mean, I can continue talking if people can continue hearing me. I don't know if the people online can hear. Can they?
This is internet here.
All right.
Maybe I can going on. Maybe I can.
Do you know? Is it?
Ya, mungkin kita bisa tethering.
Yeah, this is we're not connected anyway. It's the
I don't think so. Can you connect internet? Because also Excel. Problem then.
the people in Malaysia put on.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, sorry about that. We got cut off. I'll try to continue. I'll try to I'll just continue where I left off. I'm actually getting close to the end of my comments here. So just a second. All right. So let's see where I got cut off on. So the point that I was making was that okay, the point to be made here is that well, okay, let me try to reframe it this way and to kind of wrap up what I want to say about this. This is one of the ways I've been thinking about this, and I'll just say it's just sort of my thoughts off the top of my head, is that there's a lot of motivation in, I'm sorry, my sort of how my computer keeps turning off and turning back on and doing all kinds of weird things to me. So there's a lot of emphasis. I think, I mean, I've seen it. I've talked to a lot of people in Malaysia, also in Indonesia. One of the things that is very desirable to do if you have the means to do it, you know, and this is for fairly wealthy individuals, but you know, least a minimal basic subsistence to live on, right? And that's a very socially positive form of social welfare, right? But just having a whole bunch of empty buildings doesn't seem to me to be the way to like sustain what really is supposed to be sustained here in terms of social positive values. So the question is, how do we understand the ways in which in a community like the rural community in Bawang or in Malaysia, where I've worked before, any kind of community like this, how do the sort of positive social values get sustained? And so what I want to, and so the things I'm looking at here is like how are local social ties and networks sustained, and particularly through the sort of practices, right? I mean, by going, for example, by going to the mosque every day, by going to Jama'ah, by like continually practicing, you know, in these community events, that's a way that social ties get sustained and maintained and enhanced, right? There's also the issue around sort of cultural norms and values. One of the simplest ones, and I mean, many other people have written about this. There's classic work by Susan Brenner, Michael Peltz, other people have pointed this out. So this is not, I'm not being original here, but a point is there are issues around sort of cultural norms, for example, around family respectability, around gender norms, for example, right? That, for example, like, of course, the core explicit reason for going to the mosque or the musola and praying there is because of, you know, that's part of practice and it's considered, you know, very positive. Like you, again, the way that people talk about it is you get sort of more pahala if you go and pray at the masjid or the musola as opposed to just staying at home and praying, right? And then for men on Friday, it's sort of what it considered wajib, you know, compulsory or expected or required to go to the masjid, and it's in the Quran saying that you should go to the masjid to pray on Fridays and so forth. So there are, of course, those reasons too, right, to go. But they're also, but that is sort of like related to and reinforced as well by additional sorts of cultural values. For example, the ways in which an entire family is sort of evaluated in different ways, depending on, you know, if the men in the family go to the masjid on Fridays, or if the men in the family like go every day, or sometimes, you know, it tends to be a burden, and that's a whole nother gender issue. But I mean, that tends to be a sort of expectation placed more on men than it is on women in terms of, you know, like actually going to the mosque or the musola to pray, right? But it's related to these sort of gender norms, these familial expectations. The point here is that those values sort of only work in certain ways because of the broader communal context, the community context, right? I mean, again, I'm sort of also comparing it to my experience living in Singapore. I mean, the closest, there are just no musola anywhere. The closest masjid is like a 30-minute walk away from where I live, right? And I go there not as much as I go to the musola here, which I go like every day here, right, when I'm in a village. But when I'm living in Singapore, you know, yeah, I'll go on Jumaat, I'll go to the masjid, but it's like I individually go there, I show up, I pray, I go back home. I don't know anybody at the masjid, right? I mean, I you know, it's like, so I'm only like motivated to do it. And I'm also not as good at doing it as I am here on like going every Friday. I'll like just admit. But I find it like it's a very different cultural context, right? So I'm also using this is part just methodological to say this is part of persistent observation of like actually participating and being part of a community to try to learn and understand what's going on there and reflecting on comparatively on different experiences in different communities, right? So there's a very different set of things that sustains and promotes these networks and so forth in a village context than there is in certainly in the context of Singapore. Okay, the last slide. I'll just wrap this up, right? So anyway, let me wrap this up and turn it over to Holi. I'm sorry I've gone over a little bit because of our technical difficulties, but one of the things though I think is, I mean, because I've seen this a lot. I mean, one of the issues around urbanization, just one of many, but is the way in which like urbanization and the loosening of social ties and the ability to, I mean, one way you could think about it is escaping to the city, but it sort of allows like affluent individuals in some ways to sort of opt out of the social context of gift giving, right? If you sort of relocate yourself to the city where you can be more anonymous and so forth, don't have as many demands put on you or requests put on you by neighbors and that kind of thing, right? It allows for that to happen. And because I've seen that in some contexts of the ways in which when people are able to access urban areas, access particularly because of their access to urban areas, because of the jobs they have, whatever, become particularly affluent, right? There's sometimes I've seen a consequence of then cutting oneself off from the rural village area because of the sense that all that the people there do is tap into your wealth, right? And so it causes an issue around those social ties, right? So then the other thing is that, just more generally, again, we can talk about in Q&A, I'm sort of thinking about what are these sort of conditions that are necessary for sustainable social relationships, right? Such as family expectations, such as cultural norms and so forth. And then finally, the sort of question again, as questions I'm looking at is how can these social and cultural factors be integrated with sort of more familiar issues around sustainability, such as the sort of environmental issues and the sort of economic developmental issues that are more traditionally focused on when we talk about sustainability. All right, thanks. I'm sorry I've gone over a little bit. I'll turn it over to Holi.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Eric, for your insightful presentation. So we already can get some notes regarding to the how is the sustainable rural transformation from his presentation. So we are going to the next lecture. The second is Dr. Holi Bina Wijaya. Maybe please you can show the CV. Yes, Dr. Holi Bina Wijaya is a senior researcher and lecturer at the Diponegoro University Urban and Regional Planning Department. Currently serves as a chairman of the Center for Participatory Planning, P5 Faculty of Engineering, Diponegoro University. His academic interests and research expertise primarily include participatory planning, local economic and rural development. Now he is also actively involved in regional development in government programs related to rural development and participatory planning. You can see the education. He graduated from Institut Teknologi Bandung, Erasmus University, the Netherlands, and also Diponegoro University from his doctoral degree. And here are his professional experiences. And next, maybe please, there are several selected publications from Pak Holi, and most of the publications are related to the urbanization, rural, urban growth in rural area, and also the cluster industry formation and innovation. So without further ado, I will hand this session to Pak Holi to present your presentation. You will have 40 minutes for the time is yours.
Yeah, well, thank you, Intan, for the time. Just let me know if the time will limit. Before I make presentations, I would like to regards to all audience in here that come offline in this theater room in Urban and Regional Planning Department. But also I see in here we have many friends from student of Urban and Regional Planning of Diponegoro University, but also I see some friend from UTM. Also, I see Pak Hisam. Thank you, Pak Hisam, to join, and also all the students here from UTM. Very good. Thank you very much. That actually, I would like to continue the discussion from Eric about about rural transformations, but maybe in the context it is not so deep in social things, but maybe with more in technical hard things regarding to the rural transformations and in situ urbanizations, that I would like to see how this connected in sustainable development. Yeah. So maybe I would like to make with myself. Can I? Because I add more. Yeah. Because I have. Yeah. 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 Yeah, because I put some additional things here. Yeah, actually, I would explain about the rural transformations first and in situ urbanizations. Let me see, where is the open? Yeah. So, in the first, I would like to explain about some promote some theoretical concept regarding to rural transformation and in situ urbanizations, because quite interesting when we see how this theoretical framework give our framing on perspective, how we understand the rural growth in sustainable way. Yeah. And also then I would like to see in more deep, especially in the case of urbanization in the rural area that Eric already mentions about that. And especially I would like to present about that case of rural transformation in Temanggung Regency, that actually this is the Regency might be more hinterland from Batang Highland, yeah, maybe side of the mountain of Batang. This is the Temanggung Regency, so it is in the middle of the central Java, and see the case in Temanggung Regency where in situ urbanizations exist there, and what is the factors and also the impact. And the last, I would like to see how the in situ urbanizations relate to sustainable rural development. So actually, the issue is when we are talking about the rural transformations. Actually, if we are talking about the rural transformation, means this is the change of the conditions of rural. There is the shift of conditions of the rural. Mostly, if we are talking rural transformations, we are talking the change rural become not rural. But actually, there is some options for the rural transformation. Can be the transformations become the non-agricultures, but also there is the transformation of rural become more higher value of the agriculture itself. Yeah. And regarding to in situ urbanization that Pak already mentioned, actually in situ urbanizations that I follow the statement from the UN DESA, it is mostly a place-based urbanizations in rural areas. So the urbanization that happen in the rural area itself. Yeah. So in this context, actually, I would like to mention the other way, because most of the discussion mentioned about the how the urbanization in rural area, like in peri-urban, is come from the urban area, urban influence. But in the context of Java, especially in Temanggung, there is other options for phenomena of rural urbanizations, because the urbanization could be from the rural itself. So it could be, if we make an analogy, that the urbanization from the top, from the city, I would like to mention urbanization from the below, from the rural area itself. And there is a potential that urbanizations in rural area could promote the sustainable developments, because following the United Nations for developments, that actually the in situ urbanization with well managed in the mechanism, it could promote the sustainable developments, because with the urbanization in rural area, it can promote the better living standards of the people that live in rural area, because more value added, so people can pass from the poor conditions. It can be more capacity to meet their needs, and also better quality of life. Yeah. So, but it is in the last, I would like to make some notes on it. There is some notes how this could be happens. This is the I would like to why I would like to start off discussions. So the first might be, if we are talking about the rural transformations. Thank you to my mentors, Pak Ibrahim, Professor Ibrahim in previous time. He and Professor Preston's introduced me the rural transformations concept, that from the concept from the Van der Ploeg and renting. Actually, there is if we are in the perspective of the economic point of view, the activity in the agriculture of the rural area, that mostly in the rural area in Indonesia, and in the traditional way, it should be based on the agriculture activity. So if there is the transformations of this production activity, it could be the options of the three things. It could be deepening, broadening, and regrounding. Means if we are talking about the deepening, it is like in Indonesia we call it the intensifikasi pertanian, yeah. Deepening the form of activity to strengthen the quality of and value of the agriculture production. So the agriculture production still there, but more quality on intensity, and also better value added. So maybe for the instance, we can see the example, maybe something like organic farming, for the instance, for the deepening activity. Yeah. Before, but it is, I think it is not so sustainable if we are talking about the green revolutions of the agricultures. Yeah, more intensification, but it is not promote the more sustainable in agricultures. Yeah. The second things, if we are talking about the transformation in agriculture, it could be broadening. Broadening means the form of the diversifications of the agricultures on farm activity. So it could be new line-based work. So it is more diversifications, more activity, new crops, many things of about the diversifications of agricultural. Yeah. And the last, it could be regrounding. Regrounding means the change of productions activity. So that Eric already mentioned about the social activity in rural area. Mostly, why we are talking about the social, the community. The community is rural. It is mostly because there is excess of the social capital. There is the network. There is the value. There is the trust among the people. But also might be more homogeneous and anything. Yeah, but it could be there is the value there's, the social capital there's, but the activity change, become of farm activities. And there is also maybe newcomers ideas that might be, in this case, I mostly talking about the regrounding. We are talking about the activity, rural activity, but with rural value, rural norms, but with new activity, it is the urban activity. It is not agriculture activity, but it is more on industrialization and also service. It is the, if we are talking about the rural transformations. Second, what about the in-situ urbanizations itself? Yeah, actually, in-situ urbanization, there is might be the word of in-situ urbanization is start on maybe at 70s eras, but mostly if we are talking about in-situ urbanization, it is start on maybe 2000s when the first maybe Chu. He is from China that mentioned about the in-situ urbanization. So the in-situ urbanization is the process that activity in rural area shifting, but it is still in this area, but become the urban activities because of the development of new processing and non-agricultural business in rural area. In the first time, when Chu make explanations about the in-situ urbanization, he give the example in the context of China. In the China, when in-situ urbanization exists, it is mostly come from the government's initiative. Yeah, the governments in China, when it start open the country, it is also make a strong industrializations promotions in rural area. So many activity of industries start in 2000s. If you are know about maybe Shenzhen, most in the eastern coast, now is very much on based on the industrial activity. At the time, it is start still in the rural area. Then the government of China make some industry in this rural area. So people in rural area can just work in this industrial activity. They have the job in the rural area. They have the options not go to the city, to migrate to the city. So they just work in rural area. So it is could be so the factors Chu mentioned, it is mostly because of the promoting business development in rural area, and also there is some local development initiative, and also external investment. Why this is external investment? Because in China context at the times, also I read from the papers, many China's people that live in abroad that make investment in China. Even also in paper, I read the Chinese in Indonesia also make a big investment in rural area in China. If you know about Lim Soliong, yeah, it is also mentioned in this paper. The richest Chinese in Indonesia make investment to build the industry in rural area in China. So also, if, as we know, the China have high population density, and also at that times the government of China built many infrastructure, good transformation and communications. So it is in the initial concept of the in situ urbanization that then I would like to compare with the phenomenon in rural area in Java in the context of Temanggung, yeah. So how about the urbanization in rural area in Indonesia? There is some concept about that from Prof. Imam and also the others. Also found that because from the previous times, the Java mostly is a very dense area, because Java island in Indonesia is very good soil, and also many good hydrology. So people in Java is more dense from others island. So there is the font, if you see from theirs, yeah, many area in Java Islands already have become the build-up area, yeah, many build-up. Some of them is maybe the city, but some of them is village and rural area, and the others might be desa kota, yeah, with the compact and sprawl, yeah. And but there is the tendency in Java, especially, the urbanization is not happen in the city itself. The urbanizations, if we are talking urbanization, means it is comparisons between the new urban area compared to the previous urban area, yeah. So the urbanizations mostly happen in situ conditions, means the urbanization happen outside of the city, could be adjacent in surrounding of the main city, and also maybe could be in rural area. So also how this happens, Pak Imam also already mentioned, the in situ urbanization can be driven by the industrial activities in urban suburbs in metropolitan area. So this condition means the industrial activities still follow the main cities, yeah. And also Prof. Tommy Firman from ITB also mentions the phenomena of mega urbanization. Mega urbanization means the urbanization happen in very big area, more than just metropolitan area. Even maybe in the island of this Java is mostly happen as the urban area. And also the research from Pak Fajar and also Pak Jawoto, Mardiansa and Setiano found that many urbanizations not happen in the big city, in the main city. The urbanization happened in Java, especially in the small cities and towns, yeah, like maybe in Batang, in Bawang. Yeah, it is happened, and also from Bu Wiwi, Wiwandari also, he found from his research in 2013 that industrializations in Java, not just from the city, from the above, but could be industrialization from the below. So I would like to follow this statement of Prof. Wandari that if we are talking industrialization, then we are talking about the rural shift, rural transformations from the agriculture base become the industrial base. Means if the industrialization happen in from below, from in rural area, means this is the urbanization come from the rural area. So it is a next context of these conditions. So this is Batang, and this is Temanggung. Batang is just north of the Temanggung, yeah. So this is Temanggung. Hopefully you are already know about Temanggung, yeah. Pak Hisam and a student from Malaysia, maybe sometime I would like to invite you to see Temanggung also, yeah. Very good. There are many coffee there, yeah. Actually, this is the most hinterland area. It is just in the center of the Central Java. So Central Java is center of Java Island, but the Temanggung is just in the middle of Central Java. It is just in the mountain area, yeah. So what the important one there's if you see the pictures, there is the indications of the numbers of the people, amount of people, or amount of population for each village, yeah. So if you make a comparison there, so mostly it is spread evenly. Most of the area is same amount of populations of the village, yeah. Some of them become already kelurahans, mean it is with the administration status as the urbans, but the others still desa or village, yeah. But if you see the populations look like same, yeah. So it is the interesting things in Java or in Temanggung, and I make calculations. The density, the average population density, about 900 inhabitants per kilometer square. If we compare these numbers with the standards from the degree of urbanization from the UN Statistical Commissions, it is actually standard from the Europe. It is even the area already come as higher than town and urban clusters, and just half of the urban centers. So what does it mean? Means is the average population in Temanggung mostly as the density of urban area. Even this is we call it just the desa or village, yeah. And this is the important one, why this area can be just promote the urbanization in rural area, because the population already on the conditions on the level of the urban area, yeah. It is, then maybe I just would like to continue. This is I would like to show about the progress in Temanggung in the last 30 years from 1990 to 2020. If you see from the left graph, yeah, in 1990, 30 years ago, Temanggung is mostly something like a common rural area. About 40% of the activities there is agricultures, yeah. But uh, uh, the service and industry is just about the 10%. But when we see in after 20 years, 2010s, and after 30 years in 2020, we see mostly the activity in this area already changed. That means this is maybe the regroundings phenomena in rural transformations in Temanggung. So in 2020, the area, the Temanggung economic base is not agricultures. It is already changed or shift to become industries. About 28% of the economic base is based on the industry, service, and agriculture's just below of the industrial activity, just 25%. And if we see the employment, it is the right graph. And also there is the change. Agriculture sector declines to absorb employment from 35% just become 22%. But the industrial activity changed from just 5% in 1990 to become 20% in 2020. So even this area already still in the hinterland area, still in inland area, but because many people there and also the activity also already changed, I would like to mention this area already have a shift from the rural to become agricultures. But we see the most important things, how this rural area to becomes urbans. So I see from the satellite pictures, this is the build-up area. I compare in 2000s, 2010, and 2020. And we can see there is most change of the built-up land in Kranggan and Pringsurat. This is the rural area in land use change in the southern area, yeah, in southern area, southern eastern area, Kranggan and Pringsurat. Then I came to the area. So why this is changed mostly because in this area mostly there is the developments of the wood processing industry. Yeah. So this is the conditions. Yeah. If I zoom the industry, there's but it will be different with the situations with the industry. If you see the industry in Semarang or industry in Bandung, in Kabupaten Semarang, in Ungaran, or industry might be in Jabodetabek. This is one of the manufacturers buildings. It is just the building. You can see it is just a building of the manufacturers. There is no other activity in surrounding of this factory. Yeah. So mostly surrounded by the housing, yeah. But in here you can see just factory, but there is no housing in surrounding area. So why this is happens? It is happened because this is in situ urbanizations. So there is the factory, and people change become the industrial workers, but they still not live in the village. They not make new housing. So there is no migrants that come to this area. It is just local workers that change from the agriculture activity, the village activity, the rural activity, become the industrial activity, but they still live in village. That Pak Erick already mentions. In village, people have more norms, value of village, yeah. So it means the people still have the social capitals, still as the norms in village, but then they change, become the urban people instantly, because they change not as the farmers, they become the industrial activity. There is the differentiation between the farmers and industrial activity. In farmers, they have a very free activity. They can come to the farm area, whatever they want, they can do freely. But in industrial activity, there is the discipline. They need to come just 8 a.m. and back in 4 p.m. This is some kind of the new culture for the village, new norms. It is about the discipline. It is about the mostly as the urban norms that come to the people, but they still have become the rural peoples. And also maybe you ask, why no migrations that come, no migrations that come to this industry activity? Why people from other area not come to this area? And I found the answer, because even this is already become the industrial activity theirs, it doesn't mean the level of the payment. We call it in here is standar upah payment standards. It is as the Temanggung standards, that it is lower than Semarang standards. So people in Semarang don't want to come to Temanggung because they have lower standard. Because mostly the if you know about the rural pools and urban pool, the urban pool factor, why people would like to move from rural area to urban area, because the urban area offer higher income. But in Temanggung, because they have lower standard level of payment, so it is just happen work for the locals. The locals maybe, if they change from the farmer become the industry, they can have regular payment. They will have maybe higher payment. But compared to this other area, it is still lower income. So why no migration from other area? So the urbanizations occurs in existing village residential area. So means just the urbanization happen in the existing village. So I would like to say the urbanization that happened in Temanggung is the urbanization from below. It is in the phenomena of in situ urbanization, that urbanization that just happened in the rural area, but it is not because the influence of the Semarang city. It is become the urban area because of the local resources. Because mostly the urbanization that happened in Temanggung is because the industry of the wood processing activity, that the wood come from the rural area itself. Yeah. After 30 years, also I follow the data. The Temanggung actually already come to the higher class. If in the previous time the Temanggung become the supplier of wood resources, but now the area already have many manufacturers activity. So the data show about the manufacturer activity can process about 1 million cubic wood a year, and the wood for now, the wood from the Temanggung is just about 100,000 cubic. It means just 10%. Where the other 90% come from? Actually, the 90% of the wood that processed in Temanggung is come from the surrounding of the Regency. It is also maybe surrounding of the province from the Jawa Barat, from Banjar, and also from the Wonosobo, and maybe also from Batang, others. Because so I could mention now Temanggung already become the center of collections of the wood. It is not just the suppliers of the wood resources, but also this area already the center of collection and center of processing activity. And the wood that processed in here, it is half export, mostly to China, and half is processing for the local demands. So if we are talking about the in situ urbanization and sustainable rural developments, then there is the challenge because we are talking about the community, the rural community and the urban community are just side by side in one village. One half that people that work in agricultures, maybe village communities, but people have work in industry, maybe they more urban activities, yeah, based on urban activity. So there is the need to promote the welfare balance between this community of the village. So to implement this, also the rural area need to have capacity to deal with the problem of the urban activity. They need to have more infrastructures. They need to have more management, how to manage the urban problems then, because there is the higher income and also higher request of the people for the requirement for the urban activity. So if we are talking about the sustainable rural development for in situ urbanization, then we need to have better development policy and strategy that need to need from the Regency. If we are talking about Regency actually don't have much institutions that can deal with the urban problems. So there is the need to increasing the capacity of local communities so they can involve in process of increasing value of the income. And also there is the need for the district governments and to ready to prepare urban development policy to face the rapid growth of the rural in situ urbanizations. It is especially where the locations of the factory concentrated in Kranggan, in Pengsurat. If you know the location, actually, it will become the toll gate, the new toll gate of the Semarang to Jogja. So you can imagine in this area, when the toll gate open this area, the industry will be more will fast development, fast. Then we can imagine this area become have more urbanizations of the area. So maybe I will stop in this the presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pak Holi, for your presentation related to rural transformation and in situ urbanization for sustainable development. And next, we are going to the next session is the discussion and Q&A session for those participants here who have questions to raise with to the lecturers today. Please, you can raise your hands, or for those attendants in Zoom or YouTube channel, you can also write your questions in the chat box. Yes, if you have, or directly ask to the lecturers. Maybe students here want to ask. Is there anyone to ask regarding the materials today to our lecturers?
Okay, thank you for the presentation from from Pak Eric and Pak Holi. So actually, my question is proposed to Pak Eric, which is about social networks that have been presented. So my question, sorry, my name is Nisa, and my question is to take advantage the gift in a village to make it sustainable. I think there are to use the social networks. I think there are two options: is with collaborating or with competing. But in Indonesia, especially a village in Indonesia, it is not like that. So we can see that people in Indonesia, especially rural people in Indonesia, they just do what they like. And I mean, like, there's no clustering in village. So I think with the question that I want to ask is clustering. Yes. So so because I think if we want to make like the gift become sustainable, so we have to make cluster economical, like ada kayak kelompok-kelompok kegiatan ekonomi. So jadi adanya kegiatan tersebut tuh bisa jadi kerjasama, ada kolaborasi sehingga kegiatan ekonomi yang mereka lakukan ini tuh bisa sustainable. Menurut saya seperti itu. But in Indonesia tidak semua orang-orang desa-desa itu masih menyendiri belum tercluster seperti itu, belum ada social networks yang membuat mereka ingin berkolaborasi bersaing seperti itu. So what I want to ask is what can you give me like a best practice from another village, or maybe like a strategy to based on Indonesia condition to solve this problem. Okay, thank you for me.
Thank you. Maybe Oh, you want to for the next question first? Yes, there is a question in the chat box. Maybe to Pak Holi. Maybe for the next. I think we need to answer the first question. Okay, please.
All right, thank you for the question. So, okay, so first, if I've misunderstood the question, you can correct me. But so I think what you're talking about is, for example, well, that's why I wasn't quite sure when you said that there's no clustering, tada kelompok, itu, for example, are you talking about, you might be talking about something like collectivized farming or right, or a cooperative, right. So yeah, so for example, you can have, in general, I would say that, I mean, again, at least in the experience of my very so far limited experience in like particular village, most economic activity is relatively individualized in that you have people go, basically could be farming, could be involved in some kind of small scale trade, small industry. Like there's one of my neighbors owns a wood factory. I mean, so you have a lot of individual economic activity, but that doesn't mean that it's devoid of necessarily devoid of the social relations of gift giving and so forth. In fact, I mean, one could argue that the model is not one of like shared collective economic endeavor, but there's a lot of mechanisms through which the fruits of the economic endeavor that everybody's going off and individually, collecting some kind of profit, some kind of something in their activities. But then that wealth that's created individually through economic activity then flows into these networks and relationships and community, and sort of various sorts of sort of gift giving types exchanges that are mediated by cultural and, in this case specifically, religious values, right? Does that make sense? So yeah, so you don't, the bottom line is that, like, focusing on social values, social welfare, collective activity does not at all necessarily mean that one has to, well, I'm thinking of, because I'm not sure again what you mean by the kelompok, right? But in fact, it's been, the end of the 20th century kind of showed through many experiments in China and Vietnam and the Soviet Union that collectivizing collectivizing economic activity often doesn't work well and sometimes is quite disastrous. so there's a space for, I think there's a space for conceptualizing how you can have sort of appropriate amounts and types of market activity, which does have very positive effects. And markets do in fact work very well when they are sort of properly structured and regulated and maintained, right? And in fact, that's, I would go back to, I'll just wrap it up by saying that, like, so one of the keys of like conceptualizing my current research project actually is I was thinking of calling it Men of the Mosque and Men of the Market, because going back actually to the fundamental sort of to the Quran itself, has a very fairly famous passages on I think it's called the Surah Jumat, right? Which specifically says, like, on Fridays, put down all of your market activities and go and pray at the mosque. But then after you've prayed at the mosque, go out and work in the market again. So it's this relationship of and I mean, this is very abstract, but sort of conceptualizing the space of the market is the space of this social relationship. I mean, of course, it's also about praying and devotion and so forth and piety, but it's also about like connection and social relationship and the space of the gift. And I mean, zakat, for example, being an example of that, right? But also, like, this is not saying that like the market is forgotten and we also operate in the market. And so actually one of my interests is sort of thinking about how, if I can say this, we as Muslims sort of especially negotiate the relationship between the sort of space of the mosque and the space of the market.
Thank you, Pak Eric. Can I continue? Yeah, I would like continue the questions from Pak Hisam. Thank you very much, Pak Hisam, for the questions. You asked about the phenomena in situ urbanization of Temanggung can be sustained considering lack of immigration to boost local industrial activity, and thus the local government plays the direct role in facilities bottom-up rural urbanization in Semarang or Temanggung. Yeah, actually, this issue I already mentions in my article. Actually, in the first time, maybe we can see the rural in situ urbanizations because of the regrounding, because of the people that from farmer, from agricultures become the industrial workers. Yeah, so they have the improvement on the employment, they have improvement on the activity as industrial activity in industrial business. In this context, it is already exists for the urbanizations, yeah. But I think this is still local context, because if we see in this more general or more macro conditions, then if there is no people that come to this area, it is difficult to the industrial activity to boost the quality of the urbanization itself, because less technology, less innovations, might be less competition itself. Yeah, it is might be part of the economic activity, but it is the challenge actually. But it is true for a certain time, Pak Hisam. So in the first time, it is okay for the initial time, initial stage. But then if it would become next stage, it will be need more innovations. It will be need more idea how they can improve the quality of life, yeah, how they can improve the quality of industrializations. It need more intervention, more innovation to this. There should be two things, I think, yeah. The first might be the intervention from the governments, because the governments can see this idea, then they can promote how the technology, how the activity that improve the urbanization itself. But then the more important is it is about the market mechanism itself. So maybe for the next stage, the situation will be changed, because it the urbanization actually it is not will be not in same situation. It is actually in dynamic situations. So in dynamic situation, especially after the toll gate open, then this area will become more open. So it is could be happen. People just stay in other area to work in this area, yeah. But if we are talking about the standard of payment, yeah, if we are talking about the standard of payment, then I think it will be not all industrial activity, but one or two the leading sectors, one or two of leading industry in this area will be start to come to the next class, come to the higher level of quality. With the higher level of quality means they need to pay more. That doesn't match with the locals from the village. They need to urban people. They need to more qualified people. So in this context, maybe one or two company factories will be transformed to become higher level of the industry. And I have these confirmations just yesterday, last week. I have discussed with the local government there that they mentioned there are two industrial factories start to make mechanizations in this activity. The most lead one, the TKPI and others. So I just think so this factory maybe start to come to the next class. Mechanization means they don't use the not use the more local people that maybe have maybe lower standards of activity, but they come to the higher level activity, higher level quality. That means they need to people from other area. So when it happens, then the situation of urban in situ urbanization will be changed. It is not just in situ urbanization, but the real urbanizations. Other people from other area come to this area, so this is the real urbanizations. So the situations still, I think this is still urbanization from the below because it is initiated by the locals, not initiated by the local resources, not initiated by the urban area. But then after the next stage, it is start become the next level of the urbanization with the better qualified of the industry. I think this is also important for this area itself, because if this area not improve the quality of the industrialization itself, the area will become more targeted as the victims, more targeted as the exploitations of the industry, because the industry just use the local for the low level workers. So the government have the challenge to improve the locals to have better qualification to come to the higher level industry for the next stage. That I mentioned to the local government, this is the challenge. So it will be good if the industry in Temanggung still based on the local resources, based on the wood resources, rather than the industry might be from Jakarta or from Vietnam come to this area as the like a foodless industry, like a textile industry, like a footwear industry that not local based. It means the industry come to this area is just to exploit the local worker with lower level income. This is Pak Isam. Thank you very much. Maybe we can discuss more next week. Yeah, you will come. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is there any more question for the students or for the participants in Zoom? Okay, I think we have enough time for today, Pak Eric and Pak Holi. We have run out of time. So we are going to the last session of this opening this international lecture series. So I would like to invite Pak Holi and Pak Eric to give the closing statement based on the discussion today. Maybe your short statement about our discussion about sustainable rural transformation, please, Pak Eric and Pak Holi.
Yeah, I think we've actually gone way over time, so for me, I'll make it very short. Thank you for your attention and consideration of these things. Thanks for the question, which I think is a very good question that was asked, and I appreciate the opportunity to sort of present, especially some of these ideas that I'm still myself working through and thinking about. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Eric, and for the closing statement. So I think would be good if we see our surroundings, because especially in Java and our surrounding, maybe also in Malaysia, there is many things phenomena that we need to have better understanding in order to make better sustainable developments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Pak Eric and Pak Holi, for your very brief closing statement of our discussion today. And I would like to thank to all participants today who attend offline at the theater room, and also the participants attending online through Zoom or YouTube channel. And before we are closing the event, we would like to say thank you for all parties that have supported this event. And next, for the documentation purposes, we want to invite all participants online to turn on the camera. We will have a photo session after this with the students who attend offline here. Maybe please to all of participants in Zoom, maybe can turn on your camera. We will have a screenshot photo session from here.
Thank you, Pak Hisam.
Okay. Okay. There's other participants who want to turn on the camera. Okay, we will have the photo session together. We will count 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, I think for the the operator.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for the photo session. Once again, I would like to thanks to all participants, and also to Pak Eric and Pak Holi, who are the guest lecturer for today's series. And please forgive for us for our shortcomings. We look forward seeing you in the next series. And I would like to remind, we have the next international lecture series on the next Friday, 27th of October at 9 p.m. We will please hope you can attend for the next event. Thank you very much, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Buat yang di sini bisa foto bersama di depan ya. Thank you.